Hi everyone, this video is going to be discussing the symbolism of Jeff's broken leg in Hitchcock's film Rear Window. So in many ways, Jeff's broken leg is at the heart of the narrative in Rear Window. It's the cause for him being stuck in his apartment, which is a driving force behind him snooping on his neighbours, which leads into the Thorwald mystery, and so on and so forth. Without Jeff's broken leg, we probably wouldn't have the narrative that we have. Jeff's leg has much deeper symbolic meaning. It actually reveals a lot about Jeff, about his motivations and his fears and his relationships with others. So in order to work out what his broken leg actually means, we need to consider what we already know about Jeff generally. So the first thing we know about Jeff is that he's a risk taker and an adventurer. He has a broken leg because he stood in the middle of a racetrack to get a dramatically different shot. So he's willing to risk his life and put his body on the line for his job. He says to his boss that he's willing to jump on a plane to Kashmir and take photos from a water buffalo, even when he has his cast on. So for Jeff, life is all about freedom, adventure, experience, and thrills, and he's really proud of that fact. When him and Lisa are discussing his career, he says, "Let's face it, Lisa, you aren't made for that kind of life. Few people are." So Jeff sees this adventurous lifestyle as really central to his identity. From his perspective, it's what sets him apart from others in society. It's what makes him special. So the next thing we need to consider about Jeff is that we know that Jeff loves control. This is really clearly seen in Jeff's phone conversation with his boss Gunnison in the sort of opening dialogue scene. Jeff is told by his boss Gunnison that he can't go on assignment to Kashmir, and Jeff immediately starts blaming his boss for this. He says, "I get myself half killed for you, and you reward me by stealing my assignments." And then a minute later, he starts with the threats. He says, "If you don't pull me out of this swamp of boredom, I'll do something drastic." So Jeff is pulling out all the stops to get his way. First he tries to beg, then he tries to threaten his boss to get him to help him. So when Jeff reveals that there's something drastic that he's threatening to do, he reveals that it's the prospect of getting married. He says, "Can you see me rushing home to a hot apartment every night to listen to the automatic laundry, the electric dishwasher, the garbage disposal, and a nagging wife?" So we get an image there of Jeff's absolute worst fear. And that worst fear is having someone in his life that tells him what to do. So this idea of having basically a woman in his life who nags him to do certain things, to do these mundane chores. So Jeff fears not having the control over his own daily routine. He wants to determine that for himself, not have it determined for him by other people. And the third thing we need to consider about Jeff is that we know that he subscribes to fairly stereotypical gender roles. And this one is slightly contentious, I guess. You might have other interpretations of Jeff, which is totally fine. And we also have to be conscious of the fact that obviously we're viewing Jeff from a 21st century perspective, where attitudes towards gender and gender roles are markedly different from when this film is set in the mid-1950s. But nonetheless, it's pretty evident that Jeff sees himself as a real man's man, and he perceives Lisa as a girly girl. And as a result, he thinks of himself as being more brave and more capable and more powerful than Lisa, which, as we know by the end of the film, isn't really the case. And Jeff doesn't outright say this. He doesn't talk about gender in those terms by explicitly saying that he is more powerful than Lisa or that Lisa's weak or anything like that. But instead, he talks about his life and his career in really self-important ways. So when he's talking about the prospect of doing photographic work in New York, he says, "Could you imagine me driving down to the fashion salon in a Jeep, wearing combat boots and a 3-day beard?" So he has this image of himself as this intrepid adventurer who couldn't possibly fit into Lisa's superficial social life. And meanwhile, he trivializes Lisa's career and lifestyle by saying to Stella that
When I do, it's going to be to someone who thinks of life not just just as a new dress and a lobster dinner and the latest scandal.
Which is a little quite belittling of the kind of work that Lisa does. We can also think about the fact that a lot of Jeff's language about women is negative. He describes the wives in his neighbourhood as nagging. When he's talking about his female neighbours, he uses belittling nicknames like Miss Lonely Heart and Miss Torso. And obviously the reason that those are belittling is that they don't really allow those women to have much of an identity. And that's particularly true of Miss Torso. He perceives Miss Torso as being literally a physical object, just a torso without a head. But when he describes his male neighbours, he tends to describe them by their professions, like the songwriter or the salesman, or who eventually becomes Thorwald. When he's spying on Miss Torso, he makes a lot of presumptions about her life. He sees that she is beautiful, and then he makes the assumption that she will pick the most prosperous looking suitor. And it's Lisa who sort of corrects him and says that he's made the wrong assumption. And that's not to mention that Jeff is usually kind of creepily perving on Miss Torso and the other sunbathers on the roof. So he has this fairly superficial image of women. They're mainly objects of desire that are there to be looked at rather than listened to or seen as real thinking people. So, what does this actually have to do with Jeff's broken leg? Well, Jeff's broken leg ultimately prevents him or limits his ability to be his usual self, to exhibit those qualities that actually make Jeff Jeff. So because of his broken leg, he's physically trapped in his wheelchair in his apartment. So he's prevented from pursuing that adventurous career that he perceives as so central to his identity. He isn't able to set himself apart from others through his career. He's not able to be, as Lisa describes it, one of the special private little group of anointed people who get to have this jet-setting lifestyle. Because of his broken leg, that Kashmir assignment that Gunnison mentions, which Jeff perceives of as my assignment, is given away to some other photojournalists, Morgan or Lambert. Suddenly, an essential part of Jeff's identity is being stripped away from him against his will. He is no longer L.B. Jeffries, renowned photojournalist who's flying off to Kashmir. He's just Jeff, a guy with a broken leg stuck in a wheelchair. This makes Jeff feel really powerless and out of control. He realises that he's no longer calling the shots. His life, instead, is being controlled by Gunnison or by Stella or by Lisa. In fact, when Jeff gets on the massage table where Stella quizzes him about Lisa, the stage directions in the original script really clearly state that the camera is very low at one end of the divan. Jeff's head, half buried in the sheet, is large in the foreground. Beyond him, Stella looms large and powerful looking. So this shows that Hitchcock actually really wanted Jeff to appear powerless and helpless under Stella's fierce questioning. More importantly, Jeff's broken leg makes him feel increasingly powerless against Lisa's affections. He can't escape her affection, he can't escape her romantic gestures or her insistence that he move back to New York and eventually marry her. In this scene here, Hitchcock makes the most of this sense of impending constriction. As Lisa starts to discuss the prospect of marriage, she moves slowly towards him, kind of cornering him in the frame. She's positioned above him, emphasising his powerlessness in the situation. And between them is the newlyweds window with the curtain drawn, which is a reminder of Jeff's potential future. And of course, there's Jeff's expression, which signals his fear and gives pretty much the distinct sense that he'd rather throw himself out the window than engage in this discussion with Lisa. And finally, Jeff's broken leg means that he has to eventually reassess his belief that male equals active and female equals passive. Because by the end of the film, Jeff only manages to solve the mystery because of Lisa's bravery. She's proven that she is capable of engaging with the mystery, she's capable of taking risks, and more importantly, she's capable of taking risks without Jeff's instruction and protection. So when Lisa enters Thorwald's apartment, Jeff is left sitting there in his chair watching Thorwald approach slowly. And Jeff's face is completely anguished. His hands are shaking. He's stammering over the phone. He sort of pathetically appeals to Stella, just, oh, Stella, what will we do? Because without the full use of that broken leg, Jeff isn't able to protect Lisa. In other words, Jeff feels like he isn't able to perform the roles and duties of a stereotypical male. For Jeff, in this moment, watching his girlfriend be attacked and not being able to do anything to help her makes him feel like he has failed in his manhood. And this is where it gets a little bit weird, because for many critics, Jeff's broken leg symbolises his sexual impotence. Firstly, that's because his cast is a phallic shape, which means phallic means associated with male genitalia. So his cast is in a phallic shape, and yet it's completely useless. He can't actually use it for what it's meant to be used for. And secondly, while Jeff is in the cast, he actually seems kind of disinterested in Lisa sexually. We see him kind of rebuffing her advances, or at least seeming less interested in Lisa than he is with the murder mystery. And finally, if we think about the ending of the film, once Lisa has sort of saved the day and Jeff has barely managed to escape Thorwald, and Jeff has fallen from the window, Jeff now has 2 broken legs, and we see Lisa reclining on the sofa wearing a pair of jeans. So here, Lisa is literally wearing the pants in the relationship. So the gender roles here have been well and truly flipped. Now Jeff is symbolically the weaker of the two, both physically and sexually, and Lisa is the one who's in control. So in summary, Jeff's broken leg may literally function as a driver for the plot, but it also symbolises his gradual loss of identity as an adventurer. It also symbolises his gradual loss of control and power to those around him. And finally, it also symbolises his impotence and his relinquishing of masculine power to Lisa.